If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Yo, what's up, Beaver fam, Beaver Dam, Beaver fam, Damly. This is the second episode of the Belligerent Beavs Podcast. A lot of people thought we wouldn't make it past episode 1, but here we are. We did it. Episode 2. That's called a winning streak, and we have no intentions of stopping now. I am Terry Horstman. I am one of the lovely co-hosts of the Belligerent Beavs Podcast. I want to thank everyone sincerely who listened to the first episode, who has followed us on Twitter, who has subscribed and given 5-star reviews wherever you get your podcasts. That helps grow the show a lot. And for those who have shared the show with a friend, that's, does a lot of work for us. So we really appreciate it. I am joined by my brothers in Beaver fandom, as I am on every episode, fellow Oregon State alums, JP Bertram and Benny Wehage. JP Bertram at the Trill J on Twitter, the Sultan of Northeast Portland. JP, what's up? How is it going today, my man?
Hey, don't forget the underscores. Those are important. It is
That's
the
right.
_Trill_J.
So for years, I thought it was the Trill J, but it's really the Trill J. Pronounced the Trill J, but still too Trill to be real. How are you doing? You were wearing an Elite 8 shirt last week. You're wearing a Sweet 16 shirt today.
I gotta go through the whole arsenal.
Exactly. What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm good. I'm sitting here drinking, technically not a Minneapolis beer, but a St. Paul beer.
It is a St. Paul beer.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Black Stack. It's called Dad Smokes ? Right? Really? It's a triple IPA. It is a phenomenally tasty beer. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. It's global rating on Untapped. Yeah, it's a great triple. I mean, like citrusy, hoppy, kind of boozy, all the great features of a wonderful IPA. So right. I may see the end of this episode.
You may.
We'll see.
If you have to tuck her out at any point, that's fine. And that voice is the voice of our third co-host, live from Tacoma, Washington. He just got off the set of a Macklemore video in his faux fur denim jacket, and that I don't know who the new prospects for the Seattle Mariners are, but that's probably their Seattle Mariner jersey. It's Benny Wehage. Benny, how's it going, buddy?
It's going well, and it's actually a throwback Fernando Rodney jersey.
There you go. I love Fernando Rodney.
Yeah, point that arrow. I am doing well. I'm going back to Ninkasi again this week. This week I have the Steady Orbit Grounded IPA. And this is only a single IPA, I believe. So not the triple like JP has, but it's really good. And it's good if I'm going back to a brewery in Eugene.
Right. Of all people I know, there's literally no one who hates the Ducks more than you. And now this is a second episode of Belligerent Beavs, and you've had a Eugene beer 2 episodes in a row.
Are you sending signals? Like, are you okay? Do you need help?
I still live by the mantra, if you don't hate Oregon more than you like Oregon State, then you're doing it wrong. But Ninkasi is really good, so I'll stick with it.
It is good. Ninkasi is a very good brewery, and I said it last week, even though JP tried to mute me. We can say positive things about certain things in Eugene, and I believe that
let's stop and move on.
Is one of them. We can move on. But Ben in Tacoma, I was putting my notes together for this, and I just wrote Tacoma and Ben next to each other. And Ben, you were in Seattle before this, and the Tacoma part of your life is fairly new. And I was just thinking that Tacoma Ben sounds like the alias of a dude you know who you're like cool with, but like really don't want to fuck with. It's like, oh, who's all at the party? Oh, it's like Stevie and Doug and Tom and Tacoma Ben. It's like, oh, Tacoma Ben's there. Tacoma Ben? That Ben? Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
I'm not trying to die tonight.
Nothing against Tacoma. Nothing against people named Ben. It's just those two words together. I was like, ooh, there's a character there, and I don't want any of that smoke.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, and I have to say, Tacoma's an all right place. I was skeptical about it until I moved down here, but I like it. It's a good place.
Yeah. If you could compare Tacoma to a street in Corvallis, what street would you compare it to? I'm putting you on the spot here. Is it a Harrison Avenue?
No, it's more like 9th. Yeah. Where lots of fast food chains. It's a little gritty, but you can have a good time on it.
Exactly.
And you hit golf balls down it.
Right.
I did that with Skins. Shout out Skins.
Shout out. I decided before this, the lost member of the Belligerent Beavs podcast, our dear friend Iskinder Mintisnot, who, when the first group chats of this pod were being shared, Iskinder, our dear friend, said, I just don't want to do it. So my proposal is that we just refer to him as producer Skinder for the rest of the run of this podcast, just so that he has his own little character. But I think Tacoma compared to 9th is great. I think people would hate on 9th Street, but also you can't navigate Corvallis without it. Like, you need 9th Street. You need those fast food restaurants. You need the nicer
China
restaurants
Blue
that were further down. You need China Blue. You need the Selbaskian Suites and some of the other hotels down 9th. A few of us.
What were you doing at this? What are you doing at those hotels?
They're visiting my parents during Dad's and Mom's weekend, JP, eating breakfast. They had a great continental breakfast.
Okay.
And depending on how much fun you had, you may have needed to use a Good Samaritan Hospital, which is on the far end of 9th. But that's not the reason why we're here. We're here to talk about beers and Oregon State sports. You guys shared the beers that you're enjoying this evening. I'm still drinking the Great Notion that I had last time around. I haven't had one of these since our first episode, the climbing ladders. It tastes like just a very alcoholic spoonful of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. It's so wonderful, and 10.5%. Great Notion is the shit. JP, you know this. You live 2 blocks away and go there pretty much every day, I'm assuming. It's a great beer. It's fantastic. Can't drink this every day. So
If I had a Tinder profile, can I use that descriptor?
Yeah, probably.
Alcohol, a very boozy bite of Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
A very
Is that the place that has the like blueberry muffin beer?
Yeah, which is the most phenomenal beer of all time.
It is very good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we will, the three of us, as well as more, will for sure be in Portland on a undisclosed weekend this summer, and we will for sure have blueberry muffin beer and more. But yes, so thank you, listeners, for tuning into this second episode of Belligerent Beavs. We really appreciate you being here. We're going to get started into our list of topics now. And, we like to keep this light. This is a podcast more about fun, about, drinking beers with friends and talking about Oregon State sports. But we have to start this episode on a negative note, just because we cannot profess ourselves to be the human beings we think we are and not address this in our first segment. And we also need to establish ourselves as an anti-NCAA podcast. And this is a perfect opportunity for it. So you may have heard that the Oregon State women's golf team had a pretty fantastic year, had worked their way into qualifying for NCAA regionals in Baton Rouge. They were the number 7 seed in a field of 18 women's golf teams from around the country for a shot at qualifying for the national tournament. And you may have seen this video on Twitter. That tournament ended up not happening. It was declared that the course was playable, but not playable to a championship level. And the top 6 teams of that women's golf regional advanced automatically without a single shot being played in what I have to say is the most egregious NCAA decision I think I've seen in a long time. So we have to give a shout out to the Oregon State women's golf team for not being able to play. JP, I know you saw this video and sent a lot of notes into our group chat about talking about this. What did you see, and what is your take on on this latest installment of absurd NCAA embarrassment?
I mean, it's absolute horseshit. The NCAA doesn't care about its athletes. It doesn't care about women's sports. To talk about championship level when, for one, most of the women participating said that, yeah, the course was wet, but where it was wet was not going to impact the actual game. So they were like, it's right off the tee box is where there are puddles, but not out in the course at all. We played in way worse, especially the Beavs, right? Playing in the Pacific Northwest. They play through a lot of wet weather. And you get a bunch of these like rich white guys coming out of the clubhouse being like, yeah, this, it's painful to tell you guys, however they phrased it, but it was like the most insincere bullshit ever, where they came out and just tried to let them down easy. And then they weren't, they didn't have enough gall to like take questions. They just turned around and walked away, just destroying these women's careers where they'd worked so hard to get to this point. The part that made me like, it was the most upsetting was the automatic bids or automatic advancement for certain seeds. Seeding exists because it gives everyone a level playing field, supposedly. You kind of take the regular season or whatever constitutes that, and it's a wash, and you get your seed, and you might have a tougher route to advance, but everyone has an opportunity to advance. So to strip that opportunity from 12 teams just because they deem the course to be unplayable at a championship level is by far one of the worst acts of many that I've ever seen the NCAA do, especially to women's sports.
Especially coming off of this last spring where we saw, the behind the scenes footage of everything in Indianapolis for the men. And it was all, exciting. It's like, yeah, we're going to get March Madness back again for the first time in a year. And then they showed just the bullshit weight room that they had set up.
It was like a rack of weights.
Yeah, it was a rack of weights.
Like dumbbells.
So like, the NCAA, like, you've never cared about the settings around women's athletics being up to a championship level, and now you're using this, these natural causes, this rain in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as an excuse to take opportunity away from collegiate athletes. Like, I mean, just imagine, the Oregon State was the 7th seed of the field of 18, and the top 6 made it. Probably not irrelevant, but the 6th seed was the University of Oregon. So, Benny, if you want to tee off on Oregon athletics conspiracy theories, you can use it. You can add this to that overflowing file. But just like, imagine being on that team and how hard you've worked this season, but also, last season, which got stolen from you. And these fucking white men walk down these stairs and say, they said it was heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching. So it was wrenching for like most of their bodies, you guys. And, the Oregon State, women's golf coach, who just said, like, yeah, we're outraged that this is happening without a single shot being played. Like, let them do something. Like, I'm not a college golf expert. I don't know what the, protocol is to, handle like things with weather. Like if they actually like went by the book and arrived at this horrible decision, or if they were just like ribbing and arrived at this horrible decision. It's a horrible decision either way, but I don't know if this was like set up to fail or if they're just so inept that they tried to freestyle whatever. I don't give the NCAA a shred of credit in anything, but to say a course is playable but not playable to a championship level just seems like them being like, this would be a real pain in the ass to try and get this tournament in over the next 2 days. Let's just not do it. I don't know. Well, Benny, what do you think?
Yeah, that's where I stand, is that, I mean, this is just pure laziness by the NCAA. And if you put it in context of any other sport, like use baseball, for example, if we had a regional tournament and it was raining for 4 days straight in Corvallis, there's no way that they would say, okay, well, Oregon State will advance because they're the number 1 seed. And if they did, then there would be outrage. They hoped that there wouldn't be backlash because it was women's golf and there wouldn't be a whole lot of eyes on it. But I mean, or use the mother of them all, football. If this was a semifinals game to go into the national championship and they just allowed the top seeded team to advance because of weather reasons, that couldn't happen. So I think that they were lazy. It was obviously a wrench thrown into the scheduling. I'm sure that they needed to figure out what schools were going to advance before the weekend was over, but fucking figure it out. Like, that's your job. You can't just, lay on your sword and go, okay, well, the top seeds are going to advance without letting them tee off at all. And you have to feel absolutely terrible, especially for the seniors on the team. I mean, that's what a shitty way to have your season come to an end.
For sure. I wrote a note here to make a point of shouting out the seniors. The two seniors who were seniors last year, I believe, and came back after the last season was canceled due to COVID, came back for another senior year to help this program advance. Mari Nishiura and Nicole Schroeder, the two seniors on the team. Shout out to you two ladies for just being badass athletes and sticking with the program through all this. If you guys ever want to come on the pod and shit on the NCAA, it is an open invite. And also Oregon State women's coach, Don Shockley, shout out to her as well for just a phenomenal season. I have to admit, I haven't paid much attention to Oregon State golf in any year, really. Occasionally, and like if someone's like, oh, Oregon State golf is, in the NCAA tournament, I'll be like, oh, that's cool. Like I'll, check it out. But I do want these athletes who have, put their entire life's work into this craft to have the same opportunity that anyone should have who's worked that hard. And the NCAA robbed these athletes of it. And it's absolutely like reprehensible. And another example of why we pretty much need to tear down the NCAA as it is and completely rebuild it, because it's been a bullshit organization for God knows how long, and it's just broken beyond repair.
Well, and one last thing that I would put in is women's golf, and I'm assuming men's golf is the same way, but it's set up very similar to baseball and softball, where the traditional powerhouses are going to be south of the Mason-Dixon line, right? Because you have nice weather and much more conducive for golf. So, I mean, your top teams are going to be Arizona, Arizona State, UCLA, Florida, Alabama. So the fact that Oregon State even got to that point is crazy. And then to lose it on a technicality, or not even a technicality, just like I said, laziness, even further adds to the frustration of the whole situation.
Yeah, and transitioning over to talking about where these women were probably playing through some wet weather. Shout out to Tristan Tree. I've shot a few rounds with a couple cigars and a lot of beers and flip flops and basketball jerseys, and probably still shot better than Prairie View A&M has through round one.
You can't wait to shit on Prairie View A&M. I was more of a Marysville golf course guy when I was a student at Oregon State. Marysville was in the part of town that used to be called Marysville as a town, and it was right next to a haunted cemetery, I believe, or it was rumored to be a haunted cemetery. Because Tristan Tree was where the golf team actually practiced. That was a little too fancy for a guy of my taste. I was more of a Marysville golf course guy. I hope it's still open. It was the only place I've ever described as a hole in the wall golf course.
Perfect. Perfect. And shout out the men's golf team too for leading through day one at the Albuquerque Regional.
Yeah, they're balling. That's awesome. So yeah, go Oregon State golf, men's and women's. NCAA, there's zero chance any of you are listening to this, but if this ever gets back to you, let me go on the record and say, fuck you, fuck your face, you fucked up, you owe Oregon State women's golf immensely. And shout out again to Mari Nishiura and Nicole Schroeder, Oregon State athletics legends, now and forever.
Golf clap.
We'll say, we didn't talk about this anyways, but we'll golf clap it, and we'll say Mari and Nicole are the first inductees of the Belligerent Beavs Oregon State Athletics Hall of Fame. The NCAA won't recognize you, but the Belligerent Beavs will, because
we got your back.
We might be belligerent, but we are just, and we hate the NCAA for many reasons, but also what they did to cheat you guys out of a chance to compete for your dreams, and for the other 12 teams that were unjustly eliminated from the Baton Rouge regionals as well. So fuck you, NCAA. Go Mari and Nicole and Oregon State women's golf forever.
Chop them.
That moves us on to a little bit more silly of a topic. It's this in the notes. This is called baseball team hard hat. And I'm gonna hand the reins to JP on this one because I'm not totally sure what I'm talking about. I think JP is a little bit more of an expert in Oregon State baseball, anyways. But yeah, so JP, what do the people need to know about the Oregon State baseball hard hat?
If you're gonna go to work and you're gonna chop them, you need a hard hat.
Is that true?
That's how you do it.
Is that a fact?
Yeah.
I'm not
sure. So the hard hat was introduced, I don't know, this week or something by Canham and his staff for the baseball team as like a rally cap, as an award, something to highlight a player who has gone the extra mile, has made a sacrifice, has executed on something. Supposedly the players like this. I think that Canham likes it maybe more than the players. He's been teasing it for weeks. They've been asking about what's the surprise? What is this thing you're like, talking about busting out is a direct quote.
He's been teasing this for weeks.
Yeah, supposedly they came up with this idea in earlier this spring, and they this is where it gets kind of wild. They sent the team's analytics guru off to design and prep this hard hat, which to describe it is like a bright orange hard hat with a black bill with OSU in white letters across the front, with a bunch of trees silhouetted around the kind of like the cranium of the hard hat, if you could call it that. Look, maybe the design, I'll give it a +1. Like the design's kind of cool. Like if we had that as our helmets,
agreed.
Cool. But like, what is a hard hat? This is like crank it like a chainsaw all over again. I'm all about the turnover chainsaw. Do not get me wrong. But I think this was a swing and a miss by Canham and his staff in a season that has left a lot of doubters for his leadership. So
dude, you have to give a trigger warning when you mention crank it like a chainsaw, because a lot of Beaver fans still have PTSD, serious PTSD from that bullshit.
I'm pretty sure that
turnover chainsaw is not the same thing. I remember showing up at Oregon State, my first football game as a freshman, and then it just being third down and a chainsaw going ring, and I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Like we're just cheering and a chainsaw gets us to cheer louder. That's fine. You guys, we've leaned way too hard into this chainsaw business. The question I asked, like, is Oregon State the worst school at this kind of thing? And maybe we should even like reflect that question on ourselves after we spent half of our first episode talking about how when we invented Chop 'em out of nowhere when we were just drunk at a bar because we wanted something other than Go Beavs, and maybe we made a deal with the devil and now we have to deal with shit like that. I didn't realize that Mitch Canham had been teasing this for weeks. That Mitch Canham, multiple time national champion catcher, successful professional baseball player, semi-successful rapper, who was supposedly the one dripping swag in the O State Ballers videos, thought for months and teased this for months and was like, oh yeah, a hard hat is the swagalicious move that this program is going to unveil after months of teasing it out. I'm so disappointed to know that this wasn't just a spur of the moment type thing.
But this is what you get when you have a mid to late 30s dude trying to be swaggy with a bunch of college age kids, right? Like it, and I do have two takes on this. Like, number one, if it gets the players excited and at all affects recruiting, like I'm all for it. As stupid as it is, I'm all for it if it can affect recruiting and if the players can get behind it. But I also did not realize that Mitch Canham had been teasing this for weeks. And if this is what he came up with teasing it for weeks, then bad on him. But yeah, I mean, like this is one of those sort of follow the leader sort of things. With the first team that I can remember doing this is Miami, right? With the turnover chain, which was awesome. But like University of Miami and Oregon State are on two different levels of swag, right? And
we
I don't
both
think
had Dennis Erickson. We had Dennis.
That's
Erickson.
True. That's true. I don't think that we should be trying to play in that wheelhouse.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, here's what I liked about the turnover chainsaw is just that it fed into the Oregon State brand, but did not really separate to the point where we were trying to be something we weren't, right? So like, it was a play on words. It was the same kind of concept. I'm wearing a gold chain right now, but if you want me to be hyped up, if I have a chainsaw revving in my hands, that is way sicker than
Right.
some heavy ass chain hanging around my neck.
I am always in favor of, gestures to get athletes more hyped up. We are all hype men here. We love bat flips in baseball. We love, celebrations in football. The turnover chainsaw in football, as gimmicky as it is fine. Like if I got an interception and then sprinted to the sidelines, hyped up with my teammates, slapping me on the helmet and everything, and then someone handed me a chainsaw, even though I know it's a novelty chainsaw, that's exciting.
No, it's real. It has no chain though.
Sure, yeah, it's a safety issue. Like,
They should put the chain on.
Imagine if it did.
Imagine if we finally got a great.
Let them chop some wood.
Imagine if we finally had like a Heisman contending quarterback and he had like his leg cut off because a cornerback got too excited. That would only happen at Oregon State. I don't know. Baseball is also the sport that has the shortest leash with me, where I think all of the traditions are just cheesy and I don't care. So it's like the fact that it took them time to come up with a special hard hat for the guy that plays hard. It's like
exactly that. It's so undefined.
It's
right?
like it's like nicknaming an offensive lineman lunch pail. Like you barely even tried. Come on.
Well, and you know that they're not going to give it to the guy who hits the game-winning home run. It's going to be the person who laid down the bunt to set up the game-winning home run, right? Like that doesn't make any sense to me. You have to have defined rules of who it's going to go to.
Yeah. I'd rather have Mitch Canham be like, oh, like, yeah, this thing I've been teasing for weeks. It's another music video.
Yes.
Darwin Barney is on the bench as a coach. If Mitch Canham and Darwin Barney released like the fucking remix. And it's like, this is going to be what power, because Oregon State.
And then the person that leads the team in hits or ERA or something gets featured on the song. That is a good tease.
Especially because so I understand why they need a motivation thing now. Oregon State baseball is in the middle of the conference. They're on the bubble. I think they're sixth.
They're fourth.
They're fourth. They're fourth. Okay. They're because they just beat Arizona State 11-5. And I think that pushed them up in the Pac-12, actually Pac-11, because Colorado doesn't have a baseball team. So they should make the NCAA tournament, but it wouldn't be crazy if they didn't. And your biggest rival 40 miles down the road is in the top 10. So I get the move to let's make something happen here, but just like a hard hat is what I give my nephew who's obsessed with trucks because he's crying. It's not what I give. It's not what I give a cleanup hitter at like the only school that's won 3 national championships in the last decade and a half to be like, hey, home stretch now. Let's go to Omaha and write another chapter in this, dynastic legacy that this program has.
I'll say this, with the pictures in the article on Oregon Live, that's the extent of the hard hat that I have. But in the pictures, it does look like the players are excited about it.
Okay, good. If the players like it, then fuck me. I don't care.
Yep.
Where does this leave us on Canham? Besides the corniness, like we kind of know he's a corny dude, right? And like that's fine. Corny works.
All right, so
but fourth place doesn't work. Getting just shelled by ASU in like a pretty much must take series doesn't work. Being shown up by your rival in the South who only reinstated their baseball team because of our prior success doesn't work. I hear you. I see you, Oregon State baseball Twitter, who want Yeski and Bailey back and think it was a huge mistake to lose both of them. But I was also a dude who was so excited to have Canham back in the mix because he was an up-and-comer in the managerial ranks in Major League Baseball, who left that trajectory to lead our team when our last impeccable leader decided to hang him up. I'm on the fence with where I am with him now. I think that the hard hat thing pushed me in the wrong direction if I had to really kind of place myself on a spectrum. But Mitch, you can win me back. You just gotta perform in the regionals and head to the supers and do something big.
Don't you think though that that's because Pat Casey was so just like buttoned down and all about just like hard work and not about showmanship, and so like the hard hat does seem really off brand for Oregon State baseball.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's not blue collar by any means.
This is Canham's first full season, yeah?
Yeah, because last year was cut short.
Okay, you're right. So I'm kind of in the same spot that I am with Smith, and this might be a good transition to football. Like where I said the COVID season, I think you can kind of press pause on Smith's expectations or putting the hot seat on him at all. And I think all three of us here like Smith and are happy he's the coach. I think I might be, it's hard to say. I think I might be even though I am optimistic, I think I might be the least optimistic of the three of us. But I think like Canham wasn't just like a ceremonial hire. Like you said, JP, you know, he was in the league and he was moving up like minor league ranks and managing in AA, which you don't just get. Like that's a really sought after position in baseball coaching. And I'm not a baseball expert at all, but I watch enough baseball and pay attention, you know, to the major leagues enough to know that that's a fact, and that it may not have been super conventional to give Canham the job or to go from a guy like Pat Casey to a guy like Mitch Canham, but he definitely earned it. It's not just like, oh, you were the dude who won 2 national championships here. Come coach the team and recruits will just come automatically. I don't think it was that. So the Pac-12 is a good conference. Like even the year after we won our second national championship and Oregon was like, oh, we want to play too. Like Oregon was good right away. They honestly were. Arizona State, great programs. USC is a good program. UCLA is a good program. Washington sucks this year. Washington is usually a good program.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out. Let Tim smoke. Finally.
Yes.
I think Tim's been out of baseball for a long time.
Let Tim and Darwin smoke.
Let Tim and Darwin smoke. So yeah, it's a good job. And I think there's, you know, something inherent baked into it. Like you have advantages. Like I think kids want to come play at Oregon State. There has been multiple waves of great teams now to the point where like, it's not a mirage. It's not a trend. It's just one of the best baseball programs in the country. But it is a difficult job in the sense that the conference is so good and you can have a really good team and finish 5th in the pack and maybe not get a good seed in the NCAA tournament or get in the NCAA tournament at all. So I'm willing to give him at least another 2 years before, like I push the panic button, and I might push the rethink button on his motivational tactics in terms of swag. But also he's been in more. I've never once been in a college baseball locker room, so he knows more about that than I do. And if he's working on some dope verse to release when the team gets to Omaha, then I like it. But I don't know. I feel like JP made better beats in his house off 17th Street than either of the O State Ballers songs. So
thank you.
I remain to be impressed. While we're still talking about baseball, I have to point out that Trevor Larnach, Oregon State hero, hit the best home run in Oregon State history, probably. Went 3 for 5 for the Twins yesterday.
All right.
I was going to check his stat line tonight, but when I checked earlier, I saw that the Twins were losing 14-1, so I didn't look at it. But as of this morning, Larnach was hitting 250 in 4 major league games, hitting 5 for 20, including 3 of 5 yesterday. So congratulations, Trevor. Please lead the Minnesota Twins back to prominence. I am begging you.
He pinch hit today, 1 for 1.
1 for 1, yeah.
1 for 1.
I think that's against Dallas Keuchel too, who is pitching for the White Sox tonight. That's a Cy Young winner. It was a double.
Oh,
extra base.
Yeah.
Should we talk about football?
You mean the spring game that we all told each other to watch? And none of us watched.
None of us watched it. Why would we watch?
Hey, I turned it on for 5 minutes. It was so sloppy. I couldn't keep watching it. It was
it was none of the starters. It was none of the starters either. Like everybody was sitting out for this game.
Yeah.
There's not much to discuss.
There's not much to talk about. There is in football news, a defensive tackle named Keontae Shad from the University of Minnesota. Just a whisper away from my apartment in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I could walk to the practice facility in about 23 minutes right now if I wanted to. Keontae Shedd transfers from Minnesota to Oregon State. I don't know much about him, but I do know that we are in desperate need of interior defensive line help. And he had
good move.
2.5 tackles for loss last year.
I feel like all my tackles, if I play football, would be a half tackle.
Where you
I'd have 5 half tackles.
Someone else is making the tackle and you fall on him while he's falling to the turf.
Yeah, I'm the guy who jumps on like second or third and just adds a little bit extra 160 pounds.
But you're the first one to jump up and like pump your fist and look at the opposing sideline and go, yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. Flex a little bit on the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
It's all me. But you know what? To really pump my fist and show some support, Isaac Hodgins, congrats on the engagement. That's the best thing that happened during the spring game.
That was baller. That is Isaiah Hodgins' younger brother, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
larger brother, younger brother.
Larger brother, but younger brother.
Much larger brother.
If you haven't seen this, Beaver fans, Isaac Hodgins went to the 50-yard line and proposed to his girlfriend right at the conclusion of the spring game. A lot of his teammates also did not know it was happening. A few of them did. I did a little bit of reading before this, as you can tell, research. And
what's that?
You can see they do react. You know, it's a lot of fun. But yeah,
I just want to ask you guys. On that. How much pressure do you think he was under from his girlfriend or now fiance to do that? Because don't you think that the spring game is sort of like the season opener might be more appropriate for him to propose.
Even there's some urgency. Game. There's some urgency around.
Yeah. Well, what I read.
That's how I read it.
They've only been together for 3 months.
What? Well, when you know true love, you know true love.
You know. And
I can say firsthand, that is a mistake. It doesn't end well.
You certainly can.
That's for another podcast, Benny.
That's absolutely for another podcast. But we will get it. That's going to be a great podcast episode when we get into that. I'm sorry. I had the article pulled up. I don't have it pulled up anymore. But his girlfriend is a gymnast at Stanford.
Taylor Lawson.
Yeah. So all right. So Taylor Lawson is a gymnast at Stanford. They met a few months ago. And are both Christians who quote unquote want to keep the marriage bed pure. So that's the reasoning for your spring game proposal as opposed to a week 1 proposal.
That makes sense. That makes senes.
Yes. Let's get it, Isaac. Let's go.
Good for him.
So congratulations to Isaac and Taylor, the happy couple. We couldn't be happier for you. And thank you for providing the spring game with some fireworks, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, and sharing all that with Beaver Nation. We're all behind you guys. Congratulations.
Yeah, congrats.
Right. Very, very, very exciting. The rest of the spring game was, I watched some highlights and it was like mostly incomplete passes of third string quarterbacks with the caption of like, look what the defense is doing here. So, we wanted to talk a little bit of football. We're counting down the days. We're less than 4 months away now from the season opener at Purdue. But when we were talking before the show about what we wanted to mention about football, we wanted to bring in some nostalgia a little bit. And so we thought we'd at least share a memory or two of our favorite bowl games, because your boys, we might be old as fuck, but we did attend Oregon State during what is still the best 4-year history in Oregon State football history, 06 through 09. As sad as that might be, it is still true. And we did get to watch some pretty damn good football teams play and some pretty damn good games. So JP, I'm going to start with you. You mentioned going to the Emerald Bowl in 2007.
I was there
at AT&T Park, the home of your beloved San Francisco Giants against the Maryland Terrapins. Do you want to talk about that game, or do you want to mention another game?
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty boring game, to be honest. Like, I think the first half was like no scoring or super low scoring. What was kind of cool though was to see AT&T Park, now Oracle Park, my favorite ballpark in the entire world, and I got to see it configured for football, which was only at that point reserved for the San Francisco Demons of our XFL. at least V1 of the XFL. So I'd never actually been to a football game at Oracle Park, AT&T Park. So going to the game was really cool. I think Ev Bernard had, a really good second half, broke through for a touchdown. And that was like really it. I don't remember like anything about the game except for sitting way up in the south end zone, which was like the view level of Oracle Park, and being like, this is super cool. I'm watching football at a baseball stadium and I'm watching the Beavs. Let's go. Let's win this thing.
I just pulled up the box score for this game on College Reference because I remember this being a pretty weird bowl game. It was a close bowl game with, some interesting storylines, but it not being interesting at all in terms of the actual on-field product. The game-winning touchdown occurred with 10 seconds left in the third quarter. Evanson Bernard fumbled, and James Rogers recovered the fumble and took it into the end zone for a 0-yard fumble return. Oregon State wins 21-14. That was James Rogers' second touchdown of the night. He had a 14-yard pass from Sean Canfield that equaled the scoring 7-7 in the first quarter. Ev added another rushing touchdown without a fumble after that. Ev did have 177 yards and 1 touchdown. I believe that was Ev's last game as a Beaver. So he did, minus the fumble.
And that might have been Emerald Bowl rushing record at the time, if I recall.
I'm sure it was.
How many Emerald Bowls were there?
Like,
I don't know.
5.
Emerald, that's like a nuts company.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. That was the year we had beaten. We ended the streak of home teams winning the Civil War, now the nameless rivalry, Oregon State, which we didn't talk about in our first episode. That the student athletes on both for both schools wish to move on from the Civil War nickname, and I think we are all in unanimous agreement that we're going to honor that and not call it the Civil War, because it has really the state of Oregon had nothing to do with the Civil War, and I want to acknowledge the student athletes, and what they want is what we want. So we'll try our best to just, call it the rivalry game with Oregon. But yeah, we won at Autzen 38-31 that year in overtime with that great fly sweep to James. And that was James's freshman year. So much excitement. And that led to the thrilling 2007 Emerald Bowl in a stadium that I'm not sure has hosted many football games since then. JP, you'd have to correct me on that.
I think Cal played like their home games there a few years ago, and they were renovated.
So they had one season there. Weehage, I know you went to a couple of Sun Bowls because your aunt was on the Sun Bowl committee, which is super super exciting. What bowl game do you want to talk about?
That's right. Yeah. So I went to the 06 and the 08 Sun Bowl. The 08 Sun Bowl is generally considered, at least in the modern era, to be the worst bowl game ever played. It was a 3-0 win. It was a 3-0 win. It wasn't my worst bowl game. We won, but it was a 3-0 win against Pitt, I believe.
It was.
But my favorite game was the 08 win against then number 1 USC, where we got up real big. And USC started to come back. This was the game. So Terry was working. Were you working for the Barometer at that time?
I was.
So Terry was working for the Barometer.
Full-time sports writer.
That's right.
It's been downhill since then.
Yeah, it really has. And the
I thought this podcast was going to be friends hanging out with friends. You're bringing all I'm saying is
we are doing the Belligerent Beavs podcast. At the time, you were taking it so seriously that you wouldn't drink before the game.
I did not drink before.
So Terry was up in the press box.
I love how we beat the number 1 team in the world, and this is the story you're going with this. I'm going to stop interrupting you because I know where this story is going, and our listeners.
Well, it's funny. The funny part about it is there's a couple, but where Terry was thinking logically, and USC's coming back, and we're all getting ready to rush the field. We're jumping over the wall to get right behind the Oregon State sideline to rush the field. And Terry's like, stop, what are you guys doing? We ended up pulling it off when Terry helped me out with his name. Who intercepted?
Greg Laybourne.
Yes.
Number
Intercepted
44.
the pass. And we did rush the field. I ended up getting clotheslined or hit by some USC players. I was one of the first people to rush the field. Went home sopping wet with a missing shoe. But it was
I remember you walked all the way home.
I walked all the way home. I walked from Research Stadium all the way to 9th and Harrison.
Well,
and then
I just to interrupt real quick, I have to apologize to Skins because he jumped down below before me, and I landed on him. And as he was standing up, I used his fro as like a way to maneuver myself and give myself a more momentum and push myself in through the air to keep up with the crowd as I pushed his head back down to the turf. I'm sorry, Skins. I will never forgive myself for that.
This is what you get for rushing the field with like 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
well, and so we win. I go back over to 9th and Harrison. Then Terry and his roommates are having a party over at their townhouse. And I show up. Terry opens the door, and the first words out of his mouth are, "I'm not sober anymore." And for some reason, out of like, that was the biggest upset I think Oregon State's ever had. That is the one thing I still remember from that game, is Terry opening up the door and yelling, "I'm not sober anymore." It was a great moment.
Yo, I feel like I need to elaborate on that a little bit. So yes, this was the 2008 season, and I'm just going to keep talking about this game because I did not identify a game I want to talk about. We'll make this like sort of a every other podcast thing where we talk about a random football game. So I'm watching the game in the press box. This is like my second or third game in the press box as a Daily Barometer reporter, and not having a good time because I want to be in the student section drinking. We're playing the number one team in the country. You guys are all having the time of your lives. There is a clear cut of our friend Adam Keefe on ESPN with like just the most
I still have that screenshot.
Yeah, it's an incredible screenshot. And what's funny about it is it was happening during like a timeout, and Adam didn't know what was going on. So like you can see in the screenshot, no one else is reacting to this thing that Adam's reacting to. And he has his hand on his head. His mouth is wide open. He's like, "No fucking way." And then it's like announced later that's just like, "Oh yeah. And like, please check out the concessions, like behind, section 205, whatever." Anyway, so
he was legit confused.
He was so confused, but he was very confused.
Yeah.
I like that screenshot gets put in like every highlight video, like cut to music, and it looks super real. So we'll let Adam Keefe have that. Shout out to A Keefe. Great guy. So I'm in the press box, and I'm next to the student reporters from USC. And right away, when I'm like, the game kicks off, and I meet them, I introduce myself because I met Chris Fowler that day, and I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna like glad hand the high rollers, and I'm gonna make some actual connections. Then I get to my seat, yeah. I turn, and I'm sitting next to David from fucking Pasadena, who's just the student reporter for USC. And the first thing he says during the first quarter when Quiz starts running wild is just like, "Who is this kid? And why didn't he go to USC?" And I'm like, all right, fuck you, dude.
Because his brother went to Oregon State, man.
Yeah, because we recruit better than you. Man, this is about culture and family. You can't replicate what we have. Quiz runs wild. I think it was 186 yards and 2 touchdowns. And
wow, that's a pretty good guess. That's exactly what he had.
I've looked at the box score several times. I'm not even looking at it right now. But and it's just one of those like you watch like the eye test of that game too, like because Quiz wasn't that type of runner who would like break like 80-yard gain after 80-yard gain and pat his
he'd wear you down.
He'd wear you down. And it also just like it was so aesthetically pleasing too, because like huge linebackers would just like bounce off him. Like he had that like torque in his spin move and his side steps where like much bigger defenders would just bounce the fuck off of him. So that was super fun. But I was always aware that entire game of how much more fun all of you were having in the student section, especially when it became imminent that you guys were on the field. And Ben, you mentioned the party that we had on a 23rd and Polk after the game in those townhouses. If the townhouses could talk, oh boy. And we
Please don't talk.
Please don't. We had a pregame there too that I was just sitting there. I was wearing like a.
You were just hanging out.
Jeans. I was hanging out while everyone was like in my house getting hammered. It was just like kind of miserable, but it's like, Terry, you chose this, whatever. But what was great about it is it was the barometer. So you didn't go to print until Monday. And so this was a Thursday before classes even started. So I had 3 days to write my story for the game. So I didn't have to do anything that night. So the second I got audio from the post-game press conference, I just started sprinting down 21st to get back to the house. And I got on 23rd. And it was when Fowler says in the highlight video, there will be a humongous party in Corvallis tonight. It was like that. Like I got just on Monroe Street trying to get back, walking back to my house. I took 2 pulls off of whatever bottles of Burnett's. People were just like, hey, brother, take this shit here. So by the time you got back, Ben, I didn't even know this until tonight that you lost a shoe.
Oh, yeah.
I had to go to 9th and Harrison to get your shoes and came back. Yeah.
No, you didn't have a shoe.
No, I was at the party without a shoe.
Yeah, you had no shoe.
All night.
Yeah.
I didn't notice, but I remember getting there and just like Adam Keefe, who was on the screenshot and one of our roommates, and was just like, hey, here's a beer. And I was so happy to be with my friends, finally able to cut loose that we beat the #1 team in the country. And then I turned around and the front door opened and it was you, Ben, who I had seen all day. Drinking when I couldn't drink, and I just looked down at the stairs.
Wet shoe, half a shoe,
no shoes on, but I didn't notice, and I didn't fucking care. And the first thing that popped in my mind to yell was, "Ben, I'm not sober anymore." And then we hugged, and I remember even the cops came, the Corvallis Police Department came, and was just like, just make sure no one gets hurt, and we're like, whatever.
That truly was like out of what you see in movies about college life, where it's just like this crazy party and you're like, oh, that never actually happens. But that night people were like, I didn't see it, but that was the type of night where like you would see a couch lit on fire in the middle of the street and just be like, oh, it's because we beat USC. Oh. Like there were parties at every single house the way from 9th up to the townhouses. It was unbelievable. That was such a fun night.
I can't believe you walked all the way there with one shoe. And it was wet. It was cold. It was like 38 degrees and wet out.
Yeah. It was the end of September. And the best part of that was classes hadn't even started yet.
Yeah. And right. I remember, Benny, you were like
October start date that year.
Yeah. But Benny, you were literally like, I don't have any other shoes, period.
Right.
Like, you had no other shoes. There were no backups. You were like, I'll try to find it tomorrow. I was like, I don't think he's going to be on the field at research tomorrow.
JP, could you imagine the poor person that had to pick that shoe up after it was just trampled over by everyone?
No chance. That wasn't close to the grossest thing they picked up that day.
That's true. That's a very good point.
All you fucking youngsters enrolled at Oregon State today, you might think you're diehard Beaver fans or whatever. You don't know what it's like to go through this strife.
Until you sacrifice a shoe to Reeser Stadium's field.
You met someone like Ben Wehage and you watch losing season after losing season, and then you finally beat the #1 team in the country, and you're so happy that you literally run out of your shoes on a cold, wet field and don't give a fuck and go 40 blocks without shoes on to keep partying.
Dude, my feet were so wet that every time I took a step, water would like slosh out of my socks. It would have been so miserable under any other circumstance, but I was so happy. It didn't matter.
But let's be real, like 50% of Oregon State football games, you'd go home and your shoes were soaking wet. Like it doesn't matter. Like that's why you had to drink. And it wasn't the team's performance. It was that your feet were freezing and numb. Yes. I had a time where I left a pair of sandals. I wore a pair of sandals to a game in October.
Jesus.
And they were soaking wet, and I left them on my fireplace when I inexplicably drove to Pizza Pipeline.
I remember this.
Oh no.
And I came back and my sandals were curled up into like balls. They were like melted. Just absolutely melted. I'm surprised it didn't burn.
They were your rainbows, weren't they?
They're my rainbows. All for a Colossus pizza from Pizza Pipeline. Worth it.
Their pizzas are very good.
All right, let's work up on a good. We have another segment, but we're gonna leave it for our next episode. We have a lot of men's and women's hoops to talk about, but thankfully it's the off season, so we don't really have a deadline to get to those topics. Lots of exciting stuff happens with both Wayne Tinkle and Scott Ruick squads. But this has been a fun conversation about Oregon State football and the drinking and eating that happens around it. Of course, we mentioned Pizza Pipeline. Let's go around the three of us and just mention one Corvallis food place from our time. It could still be open. It could still not be. If you were drunk and walking home from a football game right now and you could get anything in the world, anything your heart's desire, what would it be? I will start. I need the Hawaiian steak combo from Local Boys like nothing else. I miss Local Boys so much. Best macaroni salad, best sauce. I love Local Boys. I miss it so much. Next time I come to Oregon, I think it might just be a Corvallis trip. Not when there's, I don't want to go when there's a game. I don't want to go when there's any attractions. I want to go when it's quiet and I can just smash Local Boys by myself above the tattoo parlor where I believe you got your favorite tattoo, Benny. Not sure how accurate that is, but I think you had a couple tattoo occurrences there. So
It's true.
All right. Benny, let's go to you.
Yeah.
Corvallis food fame. Where are you going?
The Oregon burrito from La Conga. Hands down. Terrible when you're sober. Amazing when you're drunk. Do you remember the time where was it Land Force's friend that got knocked out in front of La Conga? And
you came to me, you piece of shit.
That was so funny.
And then the guy wanted to yell like shut the fuck up, but also wanted to yell get the fuck out. So he yelled shut the fuck out.
Yeah.
That's so dumb, but like I still yell that when I'm like worked up and no one around me knows the reference to it. But it's
Nice.
Cool story, Terry. But yeah, that's La Conga was famous for that. And that La Conga was so goddamn gross. I feel like the Corvallis police probably just hung out there and anyone who drove after 2 a.m.
Yeah.
That's my theory on White
Shooting
Castle
fish in the barrel.
If you're in the drive-through at White Castle after 1 a.m. and you're not like a Uber, Lyft, or cab driver driving someone else, like you're not driving under the legal limit. It's just impossible. All right, so La Conga, which was absolutely disgusting, but absolutely necessary. So good call.
Now it's Rigoberto's or something else, right?
Yeah, it was Rigoberto's, I think, before we left.
Yes, it has another name now too, I think.
Yeah.
We'll probably have like 6 names before y'all left. It's a kind of a while. All right. JP, Corvallis food fame.
Oh man.
Do not say American Dream pizza.
No. Like, I mean, if I had to pick real food, I don't know what I'd pick. I really don't. It's kind of like a level playing field in a bad way. Outside of what you guys have mentioned, like as like an obvious and a favorite. Well, first, if I had to say what I probably would have done at the time, I probably would have ended up at Street Dogs down across from the Peacock and ordered some nacho cheese hot dog and just devoured that on the walk home. But
not
Street Dogs,
not Roxy Dogs.
No, sorry, not Roxy Dogs.
We have to have an episode totally dedicated to Roxy Dogs coming.
Agreed.
Up. I don't care if none of our listeners give a shit. The Ben Wehage Roxy Dog story needs to be told, and we're gonna use this podcast platform to do it. I don't give a fuck if anyone doesn't care.
I'm gonna shout out though for some of the best food in Corvallis if I could have gotten it as a late night dish. But shout out to Cloud Davidson for Cloud 9 or Downward Dog. That's definitely what I would have preferred in my old age now, what I should have preferred back in my young age of the 6 years I was in college.
And he always had an open mic just for you.
For me
as well. Yeah.
Love you, Cloud. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. What about go back to 22-year-old JP?
You had Baja.
Oh, I probably would have hell of Baja Fresh.
You went to Baja even after. My favorite part about the sort of like burrito chain lineage in Corvallis was we got that Chipotle, which we mentioned in our first episode. The Chipotle took over Fung's Kitchen, which was loved by Benny and basically no one else. Benny loved Fung's.
That place was so good.
Benny loved Fung's, and then Fung's turned into a Chipotle, and everyone was like so excited. And Benny was just like, "This is bullshit. Fung's is the truth."
It's the only hole in the wall Chinese place.
It wasn't a hole in the wall though. It was a huge restaurant.
There was just never anyone there.
That's right.
There were a few others.
It was a big hole in the wall.
Shout out if we're Tarn Tip Thai, right at the that same end of Monroe. Deserved more love. Bombs Away Cafe with the Christmas sauce. Loved that shit.
Love bombs, yeah.
Also, we went to Sancho's to get hammered and get $2 tequila shots for the listeners, because this is an audio medium, not a visual. I put tequila
air quotes.
Yeah. But also, if you went to Sancho's at any like point where it was reasonable to order food, the food at Sancho's was great.
Yeah,
true.
They had really cheap like burrito platters that was better than, you know, Chipotle or Qdoba for cheaper too. It was like $6 for,
but not better than Baja Fresh.
I'd say it's better than Baja Fresh, but Baja Fresh's salsa bar did fuck, and that's something that people don't bring up enough when they talk about like their best like fast casual burrito Mexican places, whatever. The Baja Fresh on 9th Street was a gift, and yeah.
Now I'm hungry. Let's sign off.
Let's go.
I'm pretty hungry as well. So yeah, we'll call that an episode, and we've got a lot of material we didn't get to, guys. So we'll get to that at a future recording date, but that's why it's great to have the off season. Thank you again to everyone who's still listening at this point in this episode. Everyone who's followed, but seriously, everyone who's followed on Twitter, everyone who's subscribed on Spotify, everyone who's written a review on Apple Podcasts, everyone who's shared the links to the show with a friend. We're doing this just for fun, but the support means a lot to all of us. Growing these things is difficult, so every little bit helps, and we sincerely appreciate it. So shout out to all of you who have helped us grow it a little bit. We've seen, you know, some encouraging traffic so far, and we're definitely gonna keep doing this. This is basically what our friendship is anyway, so we're kind of just like publicizing our friendship and pressing record whenever we talk. So it's, you know, it's a labor of love, but it's basically something we'd be doing anyway. So thanks to everyone who's tuned in. Thank you to you, JP Bertram. And thank you to you, Benjamin Lawrence Sebastian Wehage in Tacoma, Washington, with that sexy faux fur denim jacket and Mariners jersey. And we will be back next time for another great episode of Belligerent Beavs. That is at Bellig Beavs on Twitter. Our Instagram will be launching soon. We'll come up with some fun giveaways and stuff. We're going to have guests, hopefully to talk about the finalized roster of the Oregon State men's basketball team with these exciting transfers we got in, and talk about Oregon State women's basketball alumni, Aaliyah Goodman, who made the Connecticut Sun, and all the other fun, exciting things happening around Beaver sports. This is the @Belligerent Beavs Podcast. I am Terry Horseman, signing off on behalf of JP Bertram and Benny Wehage. Thanks for listening in. Peace.
Chop 'em.
Chop 'em.